That will never work. You can't push that. Seriously? Don't. Oh my God, that's bad. You probably should find other hobbies. You ever learn how to stop? Be happy. Don't bother me. Do you really want to? And my third grade, give it up. Welcome to Horrible Writing, the rawest, most candid, in-your-face writing show on the interwebs because none of us have time to suck. Let's do this. Welcome to episode 104 of Horrible Writing. I am your host, Paul Sading. With me in episode 104 is Lindsay Schopfer, an award-winning author of The Adventures of Kelton Moore, sci-fi survivalist novel, Lost Under Two Moons, short story collections, and a whole bunch more. He's also an award-winning fantasy author as well for his story Into the North. Lindsay, welcome to Horrible Writing.
Thanks so much, Paul. It's great to be here.
You've been very patient. Those of you who are just public listeners of the show, I love each and every download and stream of the show, and I'm honored to have you here. But I do have a special section of fans of the show, patrons over at patreon.com/Paul Sading, if you want to join us, who are going to get some serious exclusive content this time around, because in between my last episode, which was almost 30 episodes ago, and now I've forgotten how to read bios. Poor Lindsay thankfully Lindsay is a local person, so if I ever get a chance to meet him, see him, I'm buying him a beer for what I just did to his bio that you're not going to hear. But I promise, it's all downhill or uphill, depending on your perspective from here. It's going to be better because Lindsay's going to be the feature of the show and not I. Lindsay, I want to welcome you to the show, and I am very excited to talk to you today because in the months since you and I met and I pitched the show idea to you, there's been a lot of things that have happened in my own life, ups and downs, types of stuff that writers/authors go through. And the Horrible Writing Facebook community has really blossomed over the time, opened up, it's grown. We'll be over 500 members by the time this show goes out. And folks are finally opening up and sharing their personal journeys/struggles through their own writing. And you pitched the topic of hope to me, and I think that's an essential conversation for writers to have. This show is listened to by a lot of different folks. I used to believe it was all new writers and aspiring authors, but I've come to find out that that's not the case. There are experienced/published authors who also tune in to the shows, not only the standalone things, but these author interviews. And I believe it's because of what we share with each other. And it's all about lifting people up when we share our own stories and our own perspectives. So you've hit on a really key topic. So what I kind of want to start with is helping everyone understand, who is Lindsay as a human when it comes to the topic of hope? Were you born and bred into a world of hope? Or is this something more of a life skill that you had to develop your own form or fashion to help you deal with the stuff that we call life?
Yeah, so that's a pretty heavy question to start us off with.
Yes, it is.
That's good. Yeah, I did grow up in a home that had a lot of support. I grew up. If you have a lot of people that have been doing the arts, listening to you for all of their life, like from childhood and adolescence up, this might be familiar to you that you grew up wondering, am I as good as my mother says I am?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like you're writing. And in my case, I actually, I didn't start writing in prose and novels and short stories. I actually started writing for the stage. And was putting on full-length productions in 7th grade and had my own acting company in high school. And so I grew up hearing things like, wow, this play was so good for someone of your age. And, you know, it's at first that's like, well, thanks. That's fantastic. But after a while, you start to think, you know, I'm not going to be this age forever.
Right.
You know, I can't skate by on the fact that, wow, you're so young and it's so good for someone of your age. It's like, well, I just want it to be good just on its own, regardless of how old I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess in with that kind of background, I didn't really need as much hope. I felt like there was a lot of support. There was a lot of faith that people had in me. It was probably more after that, and kind of when I left that support. Those of you that that were in our earlier segment, that was just for the patrons. You know, I mentioned that I got to play electric guitar at my own graduation, but then my fame, my local fame, kind of dropped significantly after high school, and I think that that's true for a lot of us, right? You know, we're rock stars when we're in high school,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, it's we're the bomb. Where everybody knows us, everyone's talking about us, but all of a sudden you go from, you know, that little bitty pond to a gigantic pond, and it's like, oh, I'm not the big cheese anymore. I'm not the only game in town.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, that was when I started to realize, oh, I need hope. I can't just rely on my small town fame anymore. Now all of a sudden, I'm part of a much larger community.
How old were you when you had that? I'll call it an epiphany. You can call it whatever you want. But how old were you? And was there an inciting incident that kind of brought you to that?
Yeah. So out of high school, I actually took a 2-year break from any kind of writing to serve a mission. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, so I went and spent 2 years on the Navajo reservation in New Mexico. And while I was there, unfortunately, I developed a health condition that I'd had some problems with headaches and stuff as a kid, you know, migraines and stuff, but I'd never really had a lot of neurological problems. But while I was on my mission, I actually developed a condition of periodic paralysis where I would get these kind of paralytic attacks where I could be paralyzed from the neck down anywhere from a few minutes to as long as several hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which
that's frightening.
So unfortunately, yeah, it was. It definitely was. So I had to, you know, I had to come home, and you know, there's a period where I wasn't doing much of anything. I fell into some pretty dark depression, you know, because I had been so active and so lively, and now all of a sudden I was living under this cloud of, at any moment I won't be able to move.
Right.
I went to a friend of mine who had I actually met on the mission. He and I had become really close friends. He actually lives up in Victoria, Canada. So when we had been on the mission, we'd had all these wonderful plans of going into movies together, right, going into the film business, because I had a theater background and he had a film background. So I went up to Canada to try to look at schools with him. We were going to go to school together, find a film school to go to. So we went to one, we toured one. We're like, oh, this looks great. It was in Vancouver, Canada. I applied. I got a scholarship there, and I said, oh, hey, I got in. Did you get in? He said, oh, I didn't apply. I'm getting married instead. I'm like, dude, I'm leaving my country to come up and go to school with you. And he's like, well, yeah, but I need something more reliable than film school.
Mm-hmm.
So I went, going to film school, all of a sudden I was completely out of my element. I tried writing a screenplay for a student production, and it went horribly. And after that, I was just, you know, after having gone through all this, I did my 1 year at the film school, got my certificate, came home to Washington, and I was just, I was at this point where I was incredibly depressed. I was taking a couple of online classes, wasn't really working, didn't know what I was going to do with myself for the rest of my life. And I wish I could say that there was like just this one moment where all of a sudden, sunshine streamed through the window, and all of a sudden there was a but it
You're a
really
writer.
wasn't.
Make it up on the fly.
Right. Yeah. No. But honestly, I think it's more significant that life isn't always like a story, and I didn't have that one moment. I just gradually over time decided this isn't what I want the rest of my life to be. I don't want to be defined by the problems that have happened to me. I don't want to be defined by the bad luck that I may have had.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to start turning things around. And it happened gradually, but over time, I was able to start working on my next book. I went back to college, got my bachelor's degree. This was around the time that I started working on my first novel. I met my beautiful wife, who ended up being an incredible support to me, and things just started turning around. And I eventually, my first book I self-published my first book, and it's just kind of gone on from there. Like I said, I wish I could say, well, suddenly this brilliant moment happened and everything turned around, but it didn't. It just took a lot of work and sweat and blood and tears, and slowly I turned it around.
Well, and I think you're absolutely spot on, though, in the way you said it. I'm not going to be able to say it as eloquently as you, but in that struggle, that slow burn of turning things around is, I feel that's where that sustainability of perspective is built, right? That's where you change your mindset and you start seeing the world because you didn't have that one break or that one moment. So when somebody's listening to you right now and they hear that you had your struggles, we all do, but you had a good foundation upon which to launch from your childhood through, and they're determined to say, Lindsay, I hear you, but that's not my case. When you think about your own life and those moments where you slip back maybe, or those moments when you were going through all that stuff and you're struggling with the depression and whatnot, what specific things, what specific elements of the world around you, transcendent or not, material or not, sentient or not, but what specific things would you reach that olive branch out to that person and say, hey, this is where I found hope. This is where I found hope. Something to ground them on. What types of things would you recommend people look at and look toward?
Right. Well, for one thing, I would never try to tell somebody, I know how you're feeling, mm-hmm. or I went through the same thing, or even the worst is, well, you think that's bad. Right? Because I've heard all of those things too, and they're just as useless and frustrating to me as they would be to somebody else, mm-hmm. right? Because you don't know what it's like for me, and even if you looked at the superficial, you look at the outside, you don't know what's going on inside.
Right.
Somebody could have be doing wonderfully well on the outside, and then you look on the interior, and it's a constant thunderstorm. Mm-hmm. It's just a wasteland inside them. So as far as what I can offer, I think that I pitched to you the idea of hope, and I think that hope is sometimes confused with faith. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that faith isn't also important. Faith is definitely important. Faith is trying to believe that things will work out. Right? There's an aspect of confidence with faith.
Right.
It's the leap of faith. That's why we call it that, because we actually act on it. Hope, on the other hand, is your attitude as you're making that leap of faith. Hmm. Hope is giving yourself permission to want something that the world would say is unlikely, or that you might even say is unlikely. Hope is giving yourself permission to, not just say, well, the sun will rise again tomorrow. Hope is saying the sun is going to rise tomorrow, and it'll be a gorgeous day. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's really important. I think that it's important not to get our hopes up to the point where we're constantly just setting ourselves up for disappointment. But by hoping for better things, right? It gives us a reason to try. Because if we don't have any hope at all, if we don't even have a vision of what could happen, of what the positive things in life could be, then yeah, there's no reason to continue at all. Because I mean, you can't even see a reason to continue.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm not saying that hope is the only thing that you'll need to get through difficult times, but I feel like it's definitely an essential element. It's perhaps it's not reasonable, it's not rational to hope that you're going to sell millions of books over the course of your life, but you can hope for that.
Mm-hmm.
You can hope to have fans that will contact you and will tell you how much they love your books. You can hope for success. This is I teach a business creative writing class at South Puget Sound Community College, and one of the things that I'll talk to my students about is you need to have realistic expectations, but you also need to give yourself permission to dream.
Mm-hmm.
There's been I feel like in our society today, there's kind of been some pushback against dreaming. There's I don't know if you've kind of noticed this a little bit, but like there have been like speakers at graduation ceremonies and stuff, people who talk to millennials, and I think maybe it's a resistance against the feeling that a lot of millennials kind of feel an entitlement.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, I'm here on Earth, so I deserve all kinds of success and glory and wonderful things just because I'm here.
Right.
That's not the case, but I think it's too much to extreme to go the other way and say you don't deserve anything and you shouldn't expect anything.
Right.
Right? I mean, life is tough, life is hard, but that doesn't mean that we can't hope for a better day.
Absolutely. When we're talking about hope, what I'd love to be able to hear you speak on is in terms of being an author, because this is a writing podcast after all. Let's focus it onto your work now and outcomes. I obviously, I think it would come through in your writing, any of our writing, not just yours, but anyone's writing, if they had the worldview that was completely void of any sense of hope. So obviously it's a useful tool. It served you well. But if you could kind of maybe talk about the impact on your work in an example or two that you feel, hey, when the weight was on my shoulders, it was this worldview that I have of, even entertaining that concept of hope, of what could be, in your own terms, in your own words, obviously, but in those moments when that hope has carried you through and you've got those real world examples that impact on your writing career, that was kind of served in a at least a significant way by the fact that you embrace this spirit of hope.
Yeah. So, there are definitely times, and I'm sure that your listeners will empathize with this. There have definitely been times when I put out a book and, there's some initial sales, and then, you see the chart that's showing your sales it starts to kind of ground out, and, day by day it just starts to go, flatline, and you're like, oh gosh, why am I even doing this?
Mm-hmm.
Why am I bothering to do this? Maybe I should just quit and do something else. And honestly, like I said before, there isn't just a single moment of aha and come bouncing back, but it's just a gradual, over time, re-strengthening. I like what you said before when you were talking about that gradual change has lasting change.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I really believe is slow growth means lasting growth. It's one of the reasons why when I talk to my students, I always encourage them, when it comes to writing goals, I encourage them to have a goal of writing a minimum of 100 words a day.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them will say, well, gosh, that's not very much. And I'm like, well, that's a minimum. You don't have to only write 100 words. That's your minimum. But I do that for two reasons. One, what are the hardest words to get done of any session? It's the first 100. But and that'll jumpstart you hopefully to get more done. But even if that's not the case, even if that's all you can get done in a day, at least you got some writing done that day.
Right.
Right. And, it's helped me to see, after days and days of just doing small increments of writing, how far I can get just by doing a little bit. Now, as far as like, how does my feeling of hope, how does it actually affect my writing itself, like the stories that I write? I see a lot of myself in my characters. Certainly my characters struggle with a lot of the similar things I do, because it's what I know. So, they're struggling with hope. They're struggling with feeling out of place, or worrying, am I doing the right thing? And, it may sound a little bit funny, but I feel like I've developed kind of a friendship especially with Kelton Moore, because now I've done 3 books in his series now. And, he's not just an action hero. He's somebody who he experiences emotional upheavals. He's trying to do the right thing for the right reasons, but it doesn't always work out for him. Mm-hmm. And sometimes he's well-intentioned, and sometimes he's not as well-intentioned, and things happen as a result both ways. But I think that our shared experiences between him and I, they've given me insight into his character. And I think they've added a lot of emotional weight and depth to these stories. I've actually had some people who have talked to me about the stories, and I'll ask them what their favorite part is and what they like best. And, there's always a few people that say, I want more monster fighting, more monsters. But then there are other people that are like, you know what? My favorite parts are the parts where he is dealing with his family, or, the times when he is trying to figure out how love works and how romance works, or the social problems that he runs into. There's an ongoing theme throughout the series of dealing with prejudice and bigotry, and all of those kinds of themes. I think if I wasn't willing to kind of bleed onto the page a little bit, mm-hmm. I think that I don't think that the character would have developed the way he did. I don't think I would have developed the way that I have, because it's actually helped me to process a lot of things as well.
Now reverse that for me. How has the writing journey, the publishing journey, affected you, the human being, your sense of hope? Because you kind of teased us / hinted on it when you talked about that evil dashboard of sales. And if we don't, and I'm so glad you share this message with your students, because it's something I try to thematically refresh folks' minds on once in a while in our own horrible writing group, because we're fragile creatures as creatives anyways. And, right. We believe in something, we put our baby out there. It's a very vulnerable moment. And even if you have great initial sales, the business aspect of it, you have great initial sales, inevitably, unless you're one of the very select few, you're going to see that tail off effect. And I'm curious for you, the human, whatever, it may not even be sales for you. It may just be a critical review or something, but you get that thing that sucker punches Lindsay's sense of hope. And I'm curious how you deal with that, what it feels like, but then how do you recover, get back on your feet again?
Right. Well, how does it feel? It sucks.
Easy answer.
It absolutely sucks. And I'm the kind of person, unfortunately, who sometimes has all or nothing thinking. Mm-hmm. I know that's one of the issues that I have. So I'm the kind of person who, there's some devastating something or other, like I look at the sales and I haven't had anything for the longest time, or, what probably the thing that's most frustrating for me, and I'll share this with your listeners, because they probably have felt the same way. At least I hope they have. Not hoping that they've gone through something terrible, but just hoping I'm not alone. The hardest thing for me is when somebody else has done something which has worked for them, right? A sales technique, or entering into a contest, or whatever else. And I try doing the same thing and I fail at it. and I see my peers or I see these other people just rising up, and I'm still down where I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at them, and I'll give myself this much credit. I usually am not wishing them ill for rising above me, but there's always this feeling of, well, why not me?
Yeah,
I'm not any less worthy, right? I deserve that too.
Yeah.
That's probably by far the hardest thing for me to accept, for me to take, is when something doesn't work for me that's working for all these other people, even people that sometimes I think, you know what, I deserve that just as much as they did, if not more. Why are they getting that?
Mhm.
Why did they win that award? Why did they get this speaking spot, at a conference? Why did they, whatever, fill in the blank? There's plenty of examples of this.
Right.
How do I deal with that? I try to focus on something that is unique to me. I try to focus on something that only I am getting out of my writing, a success that only I'm receiving. So I'll give you an example of this. So I'm not getting the sales that I wish I was getting. I think that that's probably true of just about every professional author out there, with the exception of a few that we can probably name.
Right.
Which means that there aren't a lot of them. If you can name all the ones that don't that aren't worried about sales, then that means there aren't very many of them. So that's something that's a constant that I'm having to deal with. But the other day, this is just a few weeks ago, I got an email from a high school student in Idaho, somewhere in Idaho. And she was writing to me to say that she had been sitting in her English class. I think she's sophomore at the time. So she's a sophomore in English. She was done with her assignment early. She got bored. She went over to her teacher's bookshelf and saw a copy of Lost in Her Two Moons, my first novel there. So she thought the cover looked interesting. She took it down. She started reading. She asked her teacher if she could borrow it. She read it that week and then wrote me an email to let me know how much she liked it.
Oh, that's awesome.
I have no idea how that book ended up on that, English teacher's bookshelf there. I've never even done an author event in Idaho at this point. So I don't know how that got there. I don't know how it got to her, but just getting that out of the blue is fantastic. And I think about how many times is that happening and I don't hear about it.
Right.
Right. This book has been out. It was published in 2012. So it's 7 years now. How many times have people had this experience where I'm not necessarily hearing it? It's not like being a singer or an actor where, you get to immediately hear the applause when you do a good job. But if you kind of imagine and picture little scattered applause throughout the world when somebody reads your book and you're like, you know what? This is happening. It's out there.
Right.
I may not be able to see all of it, but every now and then I get a sneak peek of it. I'll give you one other example just because I love sharing this. Again, I had I was on Goodreads, and luckily I had just been kind of browsing reviews, and I saw someone who wrote a review, another student who'd written a review on one of my books saying, I really love this book. I wish that I could talk to the author to find out some more details about his creatures.
Oh, that's so cool.
So I said, well, what the heck? So I did a reply and I said, well, hey, I'm the author. What questions do you have? And this student wrote back and said, I'm so glad you wrote me back. I'm doing a book report on your book and it's due tomorrow. And I'm trying to figure out how to do the illustrations. So I'm like, okay, I'm definitely going to help you with this. So I'm texting them back or, messaging them back and forth, helping them figure out how to get their book report ready on my book for the next day because it was due the next day. I mean, how awesome is that? That is worth, so many just random numbers of sales and stuff. That's a real human connection.
Right.
And that's unique to me and my situation. So, having that one student there, but think about what are the unique things that you are getting out of your writing? what are the connections, the human connections that your writing is making with your readers?
And I think, that's so important, right? Because I think we're very selective creatures on what we choose to recognize and not recognize. And I love that you cited essentially what are qualitative examples instead of quantitative, right? In terms of giving hope, because I think we're so hard. I beg you, horrible writing audience, to think about this as from the perspective of a consumer. How many times have you read a great novel, entertaining novel, a fulfilling novel, and took the time to pop open your smartphone or get on your laptop and email the author, right? We don't do it. And
Right.
Lindsay's example right there, those two examples are they're just the blip of a much bigger picture. For you gaming geeks, right? It's the fog of war. You can't see the rest of the landscape. You can only see that one little immediate area around you. So if you choose to focus on the fact that, hey, this student tripped across my book, read it, loved it, reached out to me, how many other faceless examples of that student are out there that they were moved, they enjoyed it, you hit them in the sweet spot, they just don't feel compelled to take the time. It's not in condemnation of you as a writer. It's that mindset. And
it's the comfort zone. I mean, we're all introverts, so I probably wouldn't be the kind of person to reach out either.
Right. Exact. Great point. So,
being completely honest,
when you sit down to write anything, short story, or if we're talking about your next novel, are you the audience of one type of writer, meaning that book that you're writing, those 80,000 words that you're going to ultimately spend a year on, is that for you first, or a significant other, or, somebody important in your life?
Absolutely for me first.
Okay.
I always write. I am my biggest fan. I have to be, because if I'm not my own biggest fan, what's the point in writing? I write the kind of stories that I would have told myself as a kid playing make believe in my backyard.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's how I played as a kid. I would make up stories to, these tales of fantasy and adventure, and then I'd go on those adventures. Those are the kind of stories that I write. And I recognize there are some people out there who write stories and they are not the audience for them. But I question how I question sometimes, is it harder for you to have hope? Is it harder for you to believe in a piece if it's not something that connects with you personally?
Right.
If you're just writing it for, a cold calculated, well, this is what will sell. You might be willing to invest time and you might be willing to invest talent, but are you willing to invest heart and invest a little bit of who you are into it?
No, and I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly the thought processes that went through my mind. And I said, I'm going to ask him because I don't know how that is sustainable if that's where they are. I'm exactly of the same mind as you on that. So I had to get your opinion on that. Now, I do want to get one more helpful question in before I'm going to hit you with a very fun question that you're going to get to share something very personal and intimate with the world. So it'll be awesome. But before we do that, I'm big on servitude. I call it my horrible writing family because it really is. This writing is lonely. It's difficult. When we put our fingers on the keyboard, we're also doing this mental dance with some of the demons in our own head. So it's an exhausting process. There are going to be people who are listening to you right now and your message is resonating with them. And what I'd like to, one last focus on hope, what I'd like to have you take them out on is, in your own opinion, obviously, you're not a professional counselor on this type of stuff, but going forward for that person starting today, whoever that faceless listener is right now, they're still an important person. When you start thinking about, if they were asking your opinion, if they were sitting across that desk from you and saying, hey, Lindsay, how do you find hope in things? How do you strengthen that one little element of hope that you have so you can start changing your mindset to be focused on those qualitative things, like the student who trips across the book and loves it versus the fact that nobody's bought my book for a month type of thing? Besides setting realistic goals, what would be something that you would look back at them across that desk and say, hey, this is something that would help me. Maybe it'll help you.
Okay. So this is what helps me. And hopefully it helps some of your listeners as well. But when I get to that point, when I'm struggling for hope, when I'm feeling, why am I doing this? It's so hard. And actually, here, let me back up real quick. Can I share one more quick experience?
Oh, definitely.
Okay. So, I'll try to make this quick. So I have a friend, who has a twin brother. Now, my friend's twin is incredibly attractive, incredibly skilled. He's the kind of guy who can listen to a song on the radio and immediately play it back for you on 3 different instruments.
Oh, I hate that guy.
I know. Don't you hate those kind of guys? He's top of his class. All these things, all these amazing accolades that my friend's twin has. Now, my friend was born with some disabilities. He's not able to walk very well. He's very smart, but he has a speech impediment, which makes some people think that he's slow. He's not, but he just has a difficult time communicating sometimes, and everything is a little bit harder for him, just compared to your average person. Now, he grew up most certainly in the shadow of his brother, and yet my friend is one of the most cheerful people that you'll meet. And he's just happy with life. And I remember I asked him one time, I said, so tell me your secret. Why are you so happy? I didn't say because of your, I didn't mention his brother, but,
right.
Just how are you so happy all the time? And he says, well, Lindsay, anything in life is hard. Everything in life is hard. Even being lazy is hard because everything has a price. Failing is hard. Being successful is hard. Everything is hard. So if everything is hard, why don't you just do the things that you love? Because it's all going to be difficult anyway. So what I do, so this is back to where I started with this. What I do for myself is I reevaluate what can I do to make this something that I love again. What needs to happen for me to love this process? Sometimes I may feel really stressed about a story that I'm trying to work on. It's just not working out right. So I'll say, you know what? I'm going to put that story on hold. I'm going to do a different story, which is just my story. This is just from me. Maybe this never even gets published. This is just something for me to enjoy, to work on. And I did that, and I just published book 3 of that series.
It's amazing how that happens. I love it.
I'm still working on that other one. That other one is still a work in progress. It's been a work in progress for 10 years now. It'll be amazing when it's finally done. But those are the kinds of things that's the kind of thing that I found that works for me, is to reevaluate where I'm at and change it in some way so that it is something that I love. Because everything is hard. Everything has a price. So why not do something that you love?
I love that. I absolutely love that. It's so empowering to talk to people with that kind of perspective. It really is.
Yeah.
As smart as I am, I'm incredibly dumb to know what I don't know. I'm smart enough to know what I don't know, but too dumb to see the things that I have in front of me and how easy, air quotes, I'm trying to be careful here, how easy it is to have the right mindset and how powerful it is once you not just capture that mindset, but you actually behaviorally, you have to act on those things to sustain it, right? It's just almost like a weight loss program. You can't just crash diet and then expect to keep the weight off. You have to make those behavioral changes. And it's just right. Like this with me.
Sorry, just, a mindset, I don't think really is a mindset until you're acting on it.
Yeah, great point.
A change isn't a change in your brain doesn't really help unless there's a change in your actions that reflects it.
No, great point. Absolutely. So this has been a fun conversation, but it's been kind of heavy and probably giving people things to reflect on, which is my goal. I'd never set out to set this podcast out to be yet another writing podcast. I wanted it to be personal. I wanted it to focus on the journey. Obviously, the struggles are the things that kill a lot of people in terms of their writing dreams. So each and every time I interview somebody, it's one more tool we get to put in our tool belt to help us deal with all these things that all of us are constantly faced with, so that we can create and we can keep putting our creations out there to the world for them to enjoy. Now, Lindsay, as a good host, I have one more thing I need to do to you, and that is to put you on the spot, because like a good host, that's what a good host does. For you, if you are a first-time listener, welcome to the show, and I hope you're enjoying this interview with Lindsay. You're going to probably take a step back when I ask him this next question, but I promise there's an almost altruistic, good-natured purpose behind me asking him this. I'm going to ask him for a horrible writing experience. Now, give me that aghast reaction, but then come back and listen to this answer that he's about to give, because the reason I do it each and every time I have an author on the show, they've been through life. Something has happened to them. It may be funny, silly, embarrassing, humiliating. It may have been traumatic. I don't know what Lindsay's about to say. We don't script this out. I just ask guests to give us a raw, horrible writing experience. But what I want you to do is I want you to sit back, relax, listen to the story he's going to share with us, and reflect. How does it relate to you? Listen to what Lindsay's been through. Look at where Lindsay is at today, even having been through that experience, and what can you do for yourself? So, Lindsay, with that introduction to the horrible writing experience, what is your horrible writing experience?
Oh my goodness. Well, it's a little bit hard because I feel like, kind of the whole conversation has been kind of about, how to deal with horrible writing experiences. And I've kind of talked about some kind of heavy things that have happened to me. So, but let me give you just kind of a little example of something. We all know how important Amazon reviews are, right? It's an essential thing, especially if, since Amazon is our number one market for book sales. So when my first book went out, Lost Are in Two Moons goes out, for the longest time, I had no reviews, and I was crushed. I knew that I needed reviews. So I go out and I'm on social media. I'm saying, hey guys, if you've read my book, please give it a good review or just an honest review, because we need something there. So finally I go out and the book has a review, 5 stars. Nice. I go out and I look at it. The first line, it says, I have not read Lindsay's book, but I know Lindsay, and he's a nice guy.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
And I'm just sitting there like, awesome. Thanks a lot.
Wow.
And that review, okay, that review has stuck with me for a long time because it was the only review I had for a long time. And then when I finally got other reviews, that review, because it was the only review I had up for a while, people would go and upvote it. So
yes.
Even after I had reviews from people that had actually read my book, it was still the most upvoted review.
Oh my gosh.
So when you would pull up my book, even when, it says, oh, here's the most helpful positive review, here's the most helpful negative review, most helpful positive reviews, I haven't read this book, but Lindsay is a nice guy. Oh, thanks.
Oh God. Oh man. That's such a beautiful story, because that's somebody with the right approach to life and they just wanted to help out. But
see, the downside was this was someone I'd met at a writing conference. So it was another writer. Oh, they should have known better.
They should have known. Okay,
it's not like this was my grandmother or something. This was like somebody that they should have known.
I take all that back. You should, anonymous writer, you should have known better. Seriously. Oh my gosh. But here's the thing, right? Those, like you said, those reviews are essential if we want any sort of momentum, any sort of traction. I don't even want to say momentum because it's getting harder and harder to get that traction on Amazon with all their algorithm stuff that they do. But so, right. The thing is one, though, I even backtrack before that, you didn't stop. I know people who have published and they go through an experience like that where it is hard to get those. And that's the death knell for them. They are done because, like we've been talking about all episode, nobody loves me. Nobody took the time to leave a review. I'm crap. And then they go down that road of negative self-talk to the point where they decided to hang up the keyboard forever.
Right.
And you didn't allow that to happen to you. You took charge. You acted to change that situation.
Well, yeah. Here, let me tell you another, because that was a pretty short one. So let me tell you one more quick thing. That was my first ever Amazon review. My first ever negative review was also for the same book, and it was 2 out of 5 stars. And I only had maybe 3 or 4 reviews at this point. So of course I see the average rating just drop. And it's a crush. I said, oh no, I'm no longer 4.79. Now I'm down to 4.0 or something. And I went out there and I read the review, and I have probably read this review 7 or 8 times now. I don't read my positive reviews. We go and read our negative reviews.
We are,
but my favorite part of this negative review was this person said, this book is so boring. It's like H.P. Lovecraft meets Mary Shelley.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. So since then, I've kind of developed this attitude of, how often does somebody give a book a bad review, not because the book was wrong, but because they were the wrong reader for that book.
Right, exactly.
And honestly, sometimes I feel like, that's kind of the injustice of it. But, as long as you look at it as, it's part of it. And you look at the negative reviews that you get, if it's critical of the book, then ask yourself, is it because the book is bad, or is it because that just wasn't the right reader for this book?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. See, and these are behaviorally, we hit on mindset a couple of times, but through your examples like these, it also shows how you're doing a little showing, not telling there. How's that for a writing podcast? But you're showing us how you behaviorally process, how you deal with these things. And folks, I'm tired of watching writers quit on this stuff because we know, especially in the digital age, it's real easy to feel stepped on. It absolutely is. But if there's anything that you've taken from this conversation with Lindsay to this point, it's, he could have chosen to focus on all these other things. And maybe sometimes he did wallow in your misery for a day or 2 or 3, and then put your big boy, big girl underwear on and get back to it. That's fine. That's normal. It's where we allow ourselves to slip down that slope of focusing. And there's real cognitive science out there that I'm not going to get into because I'm not smart enough, how we can do that. And your brain has elasticity. If you start trending towards that negative stuff, you could potentially set yourself up for that. So go back and listen to this entire episode again if you need to, if you're one of those people. The reason I'm preaching at you, because I used to be one of those people. I saw the negative in everything. The world sucked, and I could show you 1,000 examples a day of why the world sucked. And I had an epiphany when I was reading a book on neuroscience one day, and I realized I was my own worst enemy. And once I started focusing on those more positive aspects, the world started changing around me. So when Lindsay pitched this topic of hope to me, I was thinking back to that Paul a half decade ago who was convinced the world sucked. And he just wanted his time here to end because it just wasn't worth it anymore. And then, boom, I saw the light. And I knew, Lindsay, you would do a great job. I didn't want to give you that sales pitch up front because I didn't want to put that kind of pressure on you. But it's so, so important. So, folks, if you are that person, if you're that earlier version of me, there's nothing wrong with you. I was there too. There's a lot of reasons why we're at that place. Listen to this again. Focus on what he did in response to the things that happen. It's not about what happens to you in life. It's about how you deal with the things that happen to you. Now, Lindsay, you've done a lot to endear yourself to the Horrible Writing audience. At this point, what I want to do is give you a chance to kind of brag about some of the things that you've done. You've talked about a couple of your books throughout this, but this is where I need you to kind of lower the humility and really just tell us what is out there that we can go enjoy from you, and maybe give us a hint about what's to come.
Oh, yeah. So let's see, bragging a little bit about myself. Well, you already said in my bio that I've got the Kelton Moore series of steampunk flavored fantasy about a professional monster hunter. Book 2 actually won first place for the Ozma, which is an international award for fantasy. It won that just this last April.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. And book 3 in that series just came out last June. If you're interested in finding out the plot of book 4, we've actually got a fan promotion going on right now over at you can find a link to the Fans of Lindsay Schopfer Facebook group on my author page there. And we're doing a special thing where if we can get a certain number of new reviews on the Kelton Moore series, I'm going to do a special sneaky reveal at a special online party. So we've already hit the goal to reveal the plot of book 4. And this party is going to be later this month, or later in August, excuse me. And the next goal, I think, is the next type of ammunition that Kelton uses, because he's got all kinds of great steampunk tech that he uses. So he's got exploding bullets, and he's got acid bullets, and he's got all the magnetic bullets and stuff. So I'll reveal what the next type of bullet is that will be appearing in book 4. So that's something fun that's coming up fairly soon. And also my YouTube channel, if you take a look at that, it's pretty sparsely populated right now, but I'm currently working on a video featuring all of the winners and the special mentions of a fan art contest that we just finished up to commemorate the release of the new Kelton Moore novel. So a lot of stuff happening across multiple platforms. Of course, my books are available on Amazon. And one last little thing that I'll throw out there, I am working on the audiobook version of The Beast Hunter. I'm up to chapter 5. So we're slowly getting that chipped away for all you audiobook readers out there. So
that is so neat. And folks, I will make sure that I put links to Lindsay's stuff in the show notes. So if you are a user of advanced technology, i.e. smartphones, you can go check out his stuff right there in your hands. Lindsay, I want to thank you for this. This was very, very important. And I'm so glad to essentially break the 30 episode spell of listening to me talk constantly and bring you on, and about such an important topic too. This is something I'm on a big sustainability kick lately, because I'm seeing a lot of folks tapping out. It may be my bias of what I'm looking for subconsciously, but I'm seeing a lot of writers tapping out. So this episode could not have happened soon enough. I'm absolutely honored to have you, and my first Olympia area guest. So that's like doubly, triply cool. Where can people find you out on the social webs if you are okay with sharing that kind of information?
Honestly, probably the best place to get a hold of me is on Facebook, my author page. Also, if you go to my author website, which is just lindsayschopfer.com, and you sign up for my mailing list, if you just reply to any of the mailing lists that go out, it's an email that goes directly to me. So that's another way you can get in touch with me. And if you do happen to be local to Olympia, or the South Puget Sound region, I teach community classes. They're not for college students. They're just for people out of the community. I teach creative writing classes through South Puget Sound Community College. I teach 2 to 3 different classes a month. So that's 2 to 3 times every week that you could get together with me, and we'll talk about everything from the craft to the business of writing, or even just sit down and do some writing together. So I really try to make myself available as a resource to other writers out there.
That is really cool. Lindsay, I want to thank you one more time for this. And Horrible Writing fans, until episode 105, keep being epic. This has been Horrible Writing, and hopefully after this episode, you suck less than you did at the beginning. I am Paul Sading, your host extraordinaire. You can find me over on the Twitterverse at Writing Horrible and over at paulsading.com/horrible-writing. Until next time, suck less.